Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another episode of the Sitrep podcast, your forward operations space for all things military and historical wargaming. I'm your host today, Riskin' Jim. We've been rolling out a series of wargames and discussions commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Kursk, fought between German and Soviet armies along the Eastern Front in July and August 1943, and largely considered to be the largest single battle in human history. Last week, we featured a huge game of Battle Group by Iron Fist Publishing, set at Cherkasskoye, part of the southern wing of this big German attack. Today, we're switching to the northern wing for a look at the Battle of Ponyri, using Mark Ritchie's tactical combat system in 15mm. If you're new to our channel, here is a very quick overview of the context and background of the Battle of Kursk. In the wake of the German defeat at Stalingrad, subsequent Soviet breakthroughs, and Manstein's desperate counterattacks of March 1943, what we're left with is a huge bulge extending out from the Soviet line, centered around the town of Kursk. Eager to stabilize their situation, the Germans cooked up Operation Citadel, a huge pair of pincer attacks aimed at the northern and southern shoulder of the Kursk salient in the hopes of cutting it off. The Germans amassed a huge force for Operation Citadel, rushing in many of their newest types of tanks, assault guns, and aircraft. The Soviets, though, had months of warning and had plenty of time to reinforce the Kursk salient and turn it into one of the most fortified places on Earth. Clearly, a battle of earth-shattering proportions was in the making. The northern German attack at Kursk was actually weaker than the southern attack, but it was incredibly powerful nonetheless. Mounted by the German Ninth Army under the command of Walter Model, it included 3 Panzer Corps. Their mission was to smash through the Soviet Central Front under command of Army General Konstantin Konstantinovich Rokossovsky. Model's attack went in on the 5th of July, 1943, and from the very outset, it was very tough going. Soviet intelligence had actually misjudged, and they thought the northern German attack would actually be the stronger one and had deployed accordingly. One exception, though, was near the Russian town of Ponyri, where elements of the German 41st and 46th Panzer Corps made pretty good headway against the Soviet 13th Army, specifically the 29th Rifle Corps. Here, the Germans made respectable progress until, exhausted and bloodied, they took a pause on July 9th and on July 10th made a last-ditch effort to break through the Soviet line at the tiny Russian village of Prilepi. This is the game that Mark has run for us. Now, I've got the Germans in today's game with a flat-out impossible mission, but I took it anyway because it gives me the chance to play Jagdpanzer Ferdinands of Schwere Panzerjäger Abteilung 654. These are the monstrous tank destroyers built on the chassis of Ferdinand Porsche's rejected designs for the Tiger battle tank. They would later be renamed the Elephant, but that doesn't come until 1944. I also have some Sturmpanzer IV Grizzlies of Sturmgeschütz Abteilung 216, sometimes literally translated as grizzly bear, but in German context it usually comes out something like cranky or grouch. These are the kinds of units a historically conscious wargamer almost never gets to use. These things are about as rare as unicorn turds, so when I get a chance to play some on a historically accurate battlefield, I definitely take that chance. My opponents today are Ron and Mark with elements of the 307th Rifle Division, backed up by some Valentine Lend-Lease tanks sent from Great Britain. There are also strong elements of the 1442nd Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment, normally a unit made up of Su-76 and Su-122 assault guns, but for this battle today, they were reinforced with a small number of the brand new Su-152s. These super heavy Soviet assault guns are absolutely massive beasts and will make for a fine matchup against my Ferdinand and Brummbär assault guns. So let's go to the footage and get this Clash of the Titans underway. Here is our table for today's game. It's 8x6 in 15mm. We're looking out of the south into the north. So my Germans are going to be coming out of the north while Mark and Ron attempt to deny my advance. We see some of the Valentine Lend-Lease tanks from Great Britain. Those are going to be part of the 129th Tank Brigade, part of 13th Army's Armored Reserve set up to support the positional defense of 307th Rifle Division. Speaking of the 307th, we see plenty of Soviet infantry here in a slit trench, along with plenty of those PTRD anti-tank rifles. There's also a nice big belt of Soviet positional defenses, with lots of barbed wire, Czech hedgehogs, and minefields with which I'm going to have to contend. Fortunately, I've got some of the right tools for the job. Of course, some Stug Gs, you're going to see them in almost any German force of this period, along with those smaller Bogvart, those are radio-controlled mine clearance vehicles. And of course, I've got plenty of the Jagdpanzer Ferdinands. Look at the size of these things. This is why we're calling it Clash of the Titans. These things are absolutely huge. You might be able to outrun them, but you're not going to outrun their 88mm long-barreled anti-tank gun. So the game is now underway. I have spent turn 1 moving my Germans onto the northern edge of the table, and looking southward into Soviet defenses, it looks pretty empty. Don't be fooled. There are lots of units in hidden deployment, and the Soviets are going to be getting tons of reinforcements as the game progresses. But for now, it looks like Mark is going to be taking a whole fistful of anti-tank rifle fire against one of my Stugs. I'll be honest, I don't really like their chances against the front armor of a Stug, especially at this range, but he also has some of those Lend-Lease Valentines. Now, they have been upgraded with the new 6-pounder gun, so you never know, he might get lucky here. Sure enough, I've taken some damage. That first Stug has taken a couple of long-range knocks from some of the Valentines with the upgraded 6-pounders. Yeah, really long range. You can probably barely see them there at the top of your screen. That's one crewman down, but the tank itself is operational. Meanwhile, this second Stug has also lost a crew member along with its roof-mounted machine gun, probably the crew member who got out of the hatch to use the roof-mounted machine gun. So now I'm going to go ahead and take some return fire with my Jagdpanzer Ferdinands on one of those offending anti-tank rifle pits. I realize that sounds like hella overkill, but it's all I can see right now. So I did score a relatively lucky hit with a 5 on a d20. Yes, low rolls are good in this game. Now we're going to go ahead and resolve the effects. Long story short, take your first shot. I don't like his chances. A high velocity 88mm round just landed pretty much in his foxhole. So yeah, pieces of him are going to be landing for about the next 3 days. Good night, sweet prince. We are now at the end of turn 1, where Mark is calling in his off-board artillery. First item on the menu is a smoke barrage fired by his 76.2mm divisional guns, and then a 152mm barrage. Now, fortunately for me, he doesn't get those very often. He has to roll on an artillery availability table, an 18 plus gives him 152, but how many 152s does it really take? On a 1 through a 3 on this D20, it would land on one of my tank destroyers. Knowing the way Mark rolls, I wouldn't put it past him, let's just put it that way. But he rolls a 12, so he has missed my actual tank destroyer. Now we're going to resolve some scatter mechanics. Turns out the shell lands right beside that left-hand Ferdinand. So it has killed a member of the crew. Somebody stuck his head out of the hatch at exactly the wrong moment, and he doesn't have a head anymore, because a 152mm Soviet howitzer round went off about 5 feet away from him. So, not great, but yeah, that could have been much, much worse. And here comes Mark with the crater piece. Here is a Soviet 37mm anti-aircraft autocannon. Now, as the Soviets fire from more of their concealed artillery positions, those positions are naturally revealed. I don't have any aircraft in this game, but that 37mm autocannon does pose a significant threat to some of my lighter and medium armor, like my poor Stug here, who took about 7 hits. One of them got lucky and lit something on fire. So we owe you an answer for that. One of my thick boy Ferdinands has moved, yes, he has moved, I promise, around that smoke screen and put a round right into that 37mm anti-aircraft position. So that's pretty much going to be the end of him, especially when I roll a 4. Again, low rolls are good in this game. I get to subtract 6 from that result. That -6 modifier comes from a comparison of the gun's firepower versus the quality of the protection. It's pretty much just earthworks, so long story short, take your second shot. Blammo! That is the end of that 37mm artillery position. These Ferdinands, their movement rate is absurd. It's like 5 centimeters, not 5 inches. But once they get into position, watch out. End of turn 2, and I won't lie, it's a bit of a mixed report for my Germans. We already talked about how that 37mm anti-aircraft pit got deleted. My other Ferdinands missed, but I was able to come back with some off-board artillery at the end of the turn. First up, an 8cm mortar deleted that 45mm anti-tank gun pit. That's going to be from the 365th Anti-Tank Battalion. And then my offboard Vespa with a 10.5cm howitzer knocked out that far position that you can barely see at the far end of the Soviet line. So all in all, that's not too bad. Now let's get to the not so good news. There is a ton of new Soviet armor appearing on the table, big time reinforcements arriving at the beginning of turn 3. Believe it or not, I don't have to worry about them, at least immediately. It might be tough to tell on this camera, but there is a bit of an elevation change here. I'm on a plateau extending out of the north. I'm trying to outline its extent here with the tip of my finger, but as long as that change in elevation lies between us, suffice it to say, there really isn't a line of sight between our armored forces at the moment. And if that wasn't enough protection, I've got tons of smoke screens that Mark was kind enough to drop for me in his indirect fire phase. He tried to lift my fire with some smoke screens. They drifted in the wrong position. I'm going to get more use out of them than he is at this point. You see all those ×2 markers next to all my vehicles? We're not going to fire at all. We're just going to stop the gas and go into a full speed mad dash forward. Buckle up. It's time to put the heel to the steel on those Ferdinands and move 11 centimeters instead of 5. So my big panzer charge didn't go so well. I was screened well enough from the remaining anti-tank guns, but not so much from their infantry anti-tank rifles. Again, they're going to be pretty much useless against things like Mark IVs or especially those Jagdpanzers, but against the little half-track, yeah, something went up. Probably the hydraulic fluid or the fuel or the ammunition. So yeah, a lot of those guys survived and managed to bail out, but then they took a lot of small arms fire. Not good news. Some of my assault pioneers have reached the Soviet positional defenses. You can see where their specialized half-track has detached and deployed its little bridging units. So I've got a little bit of a provisional road through the Soviet barbed wire. Pretty happy about that. Meanwhile, my poor Ferdinands, man, they're so slow. They'll get there eventually. God help you when they finally do. Looks like some Mark IIIs have shown up from 18th Panzer Division. Along with this half-track, which was also hit, these guys took a lot more casualties. Fortunately, there are 3 medics with them, so at least they have some help. Here is the ambulance, which is right next to that Stug, which has taken 3 KIAs. Good grief. And finally, the Brummbär have shown up from Sturmgeschützabteilung 216, along with 2 regular Stugs. Thank God, some additional firepower has finally arrived to help out the Germans. Time to make a real mess with my Bogvard radio-controlled mine clearance vehicles. So the driver on this vehicle actually bailed out back here, and once he did, the vehicle itself was radio-controlled through a double movement order up to make contact with that big Soviet minefield marker you see there. And once in position, he then radio detonates and blows a hole 16 centimeters in radius, not diameter, in radius, through pretty much anything that's there. Certainly any Soviet positional defenses, any minefields, any barbed wire, Czech hedgehogs, slit trenches if there were any there. In short, a nice big gap through which I can now advance. Now, one thing about which I had to be morbidly careful was clearly not hitting any of my own guys. This was actually a lot tougher than it sounds, because clearly these Bogvarts have a movement rate and you can't exceed that. They were in a certain position at the start of the turn, and I had to angle their approach to open up enough distance between the detonation point and my engineers. And I really had to hit the minefields this turn, because quite honestly, I'm amazed that those Bogvarts lasted as long as they did against all that Soviet anti-tank rifle fire coming out of that slit trench. So we've opened up a nice big gap in the Soviet positional defense, checking the box on that one. I've also killed one of these Valentines and crippled another lurking back here in the Soviet backfield. The new problem, however, is that some big-time heavy Soviet armor has now arrived. You see that Su-122 that's arrived. I've already engaged and actually missed him, but now the Su-152s have arrived as well. Yikes. First up, we have some KV-1S variants of the 27th Guards Tank Breakthrough Regiment. Those guys scare me. Not as much as these guys, though, the Su-152 assault guns. Please note these are not the ISU-152s that we would see come out, say, in early 1944 or so. But Su-152 is scary enough, trust me. The Soviets would call this thing the animal killer because, as we all know, the Germans like to name their tanks after all kinds of fearsome beasts. Panthers, tigers, grizzly bears, oh my. The Soviets said, long story short, take your third shot. I don't care what kind of animal you name your tank after, this thing is gonna kill it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we now come to this evening's main event. Let's get ready to rumble! Alright, we call this game the Clash of the Titans for a reason. We've got two Su-152s. You see where they're hull down there on the reverse slope of that plateau, and they are firing right past the east side of that building, right over the heads of their own guys. And they are locked up in front-to-front slugging combat with their opposite number, Mr. Ferdinand, tank destroyer. So hopefully now you can sort of see where the line of sight is. You barely see those Su-152s way there at the top of your screen. My big problem is that I'm currently outnumbered. I do have two more Ferdinands that can get to him in about a movement phase or two, and then I'll have him outnumbered 3-2. But can my one guy last that long? The bigger problem, though, the Soviets are beginning to reveal more of their entrenched artillery positions. So in those houses are 76.2 millimeter divisional guns of the 837th Artillery Regiment, again backing up 121st Rifle Regiment of the 307th Rifle Division, 29th Rifle Corps. So this battle continues to heat up. So I'm not gonna lie, turn 6 has been pretty frustrating. You can see here where my poor engineers have now lost their half-track. Fortunately, most of them are still alive. And you can see where some of them are labeled with sapper or demo tags. They have gone forward and blown up the rest of the positions that were flanking that little bridge that I had open with the half-track's detachable bridging units there. So now I've got a more or less unbroken void in the Soviet positional defenses, extending from about here. Never mind that one Czech hedgehog there. Is there any wire under any of that smoke? No. Alright, cool. So yeah, all the way up to there. So basically 3 feet have been removed from the Soviet positional defense. So I have managed to get my 3 Ferdinands in position to engage just 2 Su-152s. Unfortunately, for the moment, all 3 of them have missed. Better than these guys, though, every single one of those mortars and Stugs have all missed, and now one of my Stugs is burning, because of course it is. It was taken out by this 85mm anti-aircraft gun, basically using it almost like a Soviet 88. But fortunately, my Vespa 10.5cm offboard howitzer was able to sort out that little problem in the indirect fire phase. So take that. Our Clash of the Titans is undergoing a bit of a distraction at the moment. I have knocked out one of the Su-152s, so a little bit of progress on that front. 1 down, 1 to go. But now I've got a new problem. 3 KV-1S heavy tanks of the 27th Guards Tank Breakthrough Regiment. Looks like they're trying to turn my left wing. So I have to peel off one of my Ferdinands and deal with that threat. And to make matters worse, yeah, you'll see that one of my Ferdinands is now burning. So what the hell could have possibly done that? You'd think it would have been one of the KV-1s. They are only armed with 76mm guns, but at least they're heavy tanks. But no, it was that little Su-76 way back there behind the burning building, landed a flank shot, and then on the vehicle effect table, rolled a 1.
You serious?
So, if we're going to continue to call this a boxing match or a pro wrestling match, this is like the sexy little Miss Thing manager, 98 pounds soaking wet, jumped in the ring when the ref wasn't looking, and caved in the back of my head with a folding chair. Oh boy. More bad news over here on the German right wing, where my Stugs, all those little red buttons mean that the gun is inoperable. That Stug also has its engine inoperable. I don't know what I'm going to do over here. Everything's in chaos at the moment. So, as my Panzer, or Armored Repair and Recovery Vehicle, trundles up to maybe repair either the Stug or the mortar that have been damaged over there on the German right wing, that same little annoying, pissant little Su-76 assault gun that somehow managed to miracle snipe one of my Ferdinands just rolled a natural 1 to get a flank hit on the next Ferdinand.
You serious?
So fortunately, it was the chance to hit and not the chance to damage. I mean, it's easy enough to hit one of those Ferdinands. Good grief, look at how big they are. But the real challenge now comes in whether or not Ron's little 76mm armor-piercing round is going to get through even the flank armor on these Ferdinands. It's just crazy how thick the skin of these things were. Hence, they have that terrible movement rate. So even after he rolls, he then has to add a bunch to his result because his gun is so much weaker than my armor. He doesn't get through the armor, but he does kill at least one more Greenlander. Okay, looks like the industrious little Burger Panzer has actually repaired my Stug. So you have to get pretty much base-to-base contact with the damaged AFV. There's a chance to repair the engine, a chance to repair the gun. We wound up with a 2. I declared ahead of time, I should say, that I was going to repair the engine. So yeah, that thing is now mobile again. I'm pushing them up onto the high ground with those martyrs, even though none of their main guns work, because they all have hull machine guns and they count as armored fighting vehicles on the objective terrain. And here we are at the end of the game. We have now completed 15 turns, and as far as a final result goes, well, it's a mixed report to say the least. Suffice it to say, the Germans have come nowhere close to achieving all of their victory objectives. Did I manage to achieve any of our objectives? Well, actually yes. So the first big German objective was to occupy and control this peninsula of high ground, this little plateau you see here. And how the game defines that is there can be no Soviet tanks or assault guns or support weapons, and that goes all the way down to crew-served machine guns, operational anywhere on that little peninsula of high ground. Did I manage to achieve that? Actually, yes I did. We destroyed all the Soviet tanks and assault guns, including that very annoying Su-76 that somehow miracle sniped one of my Ferdinands. So we achieved that. The other objective was to break off the other side of the table on that road that leads off to the southeast. No, I didn't come close to achieving that. Quite frankly, we're discussing it at the table now. There's just no way the Germans could have possibly achieved that. I did manage to knock out both of the Su-152s, though. If you look back at the footage, you're going to see 2 smoke bombs sort of on top of their figures. One of them has kind of fallen off, but trust me, they were both knocked out. You'll see that there are 2 little smoke poofs there. So at least when it came to the silly little Clash of the Titans, I kind of won that. But that's our result, and definitely well fought by both of my opponents. So there are the results, everyone. My Ferdinand tank destroyers and Brummbär assault guns did punch through the Soviet line and cleaned out all those Soviet anti-tank guns, and my follow-up infantry did take that Soviet trench line. So we did take the immediate tactical objective for the game. But there's no way we can call this a German victory because I never came close to taking that secondary bonus objective, clearing that road that was held by Ron's Su-152s. Now, by the end of the day, I did actually neutralize those Su-152s, but it just took way too much time, and especially my Ferdinands were just way too slow to exploit any kind of a breach. I did like the way my Bogvard mine-clearing vehicles performed. They blew a nice pretty hole right there in the middle of the Soviet minefield and positional defenses. That definitely really helped out a lot, especially getting my slower follow-on waves deeper into the Soviet position. Historically, of course, German defeat in this scenario was a foregone conclusion. There was just no way any of Modul's forces were going to make significant headway against Rokossovsky's defenses, especially by this point in the campaign. Seeing as how the Germans more or less matched the historical results of the day, we're going to go ahead and call this a campaign draw. Although, to be completely honest, there is no way I came even close to achieving that bonus objective of getting any German armor off that southeast road. In my defense, though, the scenario designer also admitted to me at the table that that bonus objective was more or less impossible, and I am inclined to agree. But let's get real here, folks. Anytime a German player gets to put Ferdinand tank destroyers or Brummbär assault guns on the table, that's a win in my book. And that's where we're going to leave it for today, folks. Thanks very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Also, please continue to watch this space for more 80th anniversary content on the Battle of Kursk throughout the rest of July. Later on in July, we're also going to hit Operation Husky, 80th anniversary of the Allied landings in Sicily. Yeah, July 1943 was a very busy month in World War II. Also, please consider joining the Sitrep Podcast Discord. There is an auto-accept invitation link to our Discord in the description of this video. Check out the community, and better yet, show us what's happening on your hobby table. But for now, this is Risking the Gym with the Sitrep Podcast. We are rounds complete for another episode, and as always, Tango Mike for watching.